Hi, Cheryl Boglioli with Gel Press, and I'm back again to show you what I created using the prints that we did Wednesday. So if you remember Wednesday, we did a few different prints using the new Impressables, and we used the repeating circles, which is designed by Jen Starr. So I pulled a whole bunch of prints, and now I'm going to show you what we created. So here's the little card that I created with my print. But there's so much fun that you could do. I mean, you can make a variety of cards. So here's another, just as simple. This time I printed directly onto the card. And one of the prints that we made, here's another one here. So I'm going to take a few minutes and I'm going to show you how easy it was just to put this card here together. And hopefully you will try something like this on your own. So stay tuned. So we're going to take the prints that we worked on last Wednesday. We got a variety of different prints, doing lifts, turning it 1/4 turn, just playing with different colors. So go back and make sure that you watch that video. Here's one that I just loved. And so I'm going to pick through here and I'm going to pick my favorite, which this one ended up being my favorite. That was the lift print. So we're going to take that and we're going to use our Strathmore card. We're using just a print card, 5x7. So make sure that you do measure your card just in case it's not exactly 5x7. And we're going to trim it. You could print directly on the card. So here's some that I did where I printed directly onto the card, and now they just need some extra embellishments. But today we're going to work with the print that we have. I'm going to work with some Coordinations cardstock, some Beacon zip dry, some Thermo Web foam squares, and the Wow chipboard. I love this. Isn't this just so cute? This is a palette, and we're going to do some prints on the gel press plate. So we're going to use some stamps by Yvonne Blair with Impression Obsessions. So let's put all this together and make a card. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to trim down my cardstock so that I get it just inside the 5x7. I want a nice little border. And then I'm going to take the print that we did and I'm going to trim that just a slightly bit smaller, about 1/8 of an inch smaller than my cardstock. But first I need to square up the edges. So I just took off the edge of that one, and then I'm going to just trim it down. So now I have clean edges. Same thing, I'm going to clean off this edge now, make it to fit the size that I want. And boom, there we go. So that works really well. And I like the way that it just lines up on the card, and it just gives it just that little bit of a frame. So I'm going to use my zip dry because I know that it's not going to warp my paper and it'll give me a good adhesion. Plus I love working with liquid adhesives when I'm working with cards because I can never get it straight. So if I use a liquid adhesive, that gives me a little bit of flexibility to just nudge it in place and to be able to put it where I want it when I apply it to my cardstock base. So there we go. We're going to line it up. See, I get to smudge it just a little bit. And we're going to move this just paper cutter out of the way. Now I'm going to work with our stamps. So I've lined this up. And I'm going to use archival ink because I want a really black ink. Just ink it up really quickly and stamp it. I always do a little test run first just to make sure that it's going to work. And it does. So we're going to come back up and give just a little pats. Now I wanted to stamp it before I added it to my card base because I wanted my paper really straight. So I've now just added our sentiment, and now I can use some of the Thermo Web squares to add a little lift and make this card just a little bulkier. So I'm just going to pop those on there really quick. We've taken them all off, and make sure that your card is straight and give it a little press. So there we go. So our card base is all together. Now I want to dress this up even more and add some more embellishments. So this is where we're going to pull out our dirty gel plate and we're going to use our Wow chipboard. I love this little paint palette. Look, it comes with all these little paint brushes and these cute little paint splotches so you can decorate those. So I'm going to show you how we can use our gel press plate to decorate this even more. So the first thing, I want to pick up some of the dirty paint that's on there. So I'm going to add, I'm going to move everything out of my way so I can work here. I'm going to add a little bit of white just so that I can pick up the old print. Again, go back and look at some of our other videos of how to do a lift print. It doesn't take much at all. I'm going to just do a real light coat here. And now I'm also going to make sure that I take a clean piece of paper and just real lightly rub some of that off because I want to get the paint. So I'm going to press this. Now this grabs, so you can just, here I just put a piece of paper over it so I can really make sure that I get all that paint off. So give it a little lift. It is really stuck on there. So very carefully I'm going to lift it off. And look, it picked up all the paint. So I'm going to finish picking it up. And I'm even going to roll the edges to do some lift prints to get those edges all nice and neat. And that's going to always give you a more finished product. So we rolled that up. Now, after looking at it, I decided I wanted a little bit more color on the edge. So I'm going to take some heavy duty paint from the Crafter's Workshop and just smooth that out so that I can do the same thing with the edges of that palette and just roll them around and just kind of get those edges nice and neat and a little bit on the edges of the palette as well. So this is going to help it pop a little bit more when I actually apply it to the card. Now, I want to paint my little paint splotches. So what I decided to do is actually use my gel press plate as a paint palette. So I'm just putting little dots of color. Again, I'm using the new Heavy Body Paint by the Crafter's Workshop, and just putting little dots of color on my palette and going to just smooth that around. Now I pulled out two of the same colors so that it'll match in our background. And I'm going to wet my brush. I always dampen my brush and then wipe it out before I use acrylic paints. Now I start painting and I'm getting paint on my fingers. I'm trying to get it on the edges and I'm touching it. So after a few minutes of trying this, you'll see where I finally got a little smarter here. Not yet, but I'm just painting and trying to get those little edges, but the little paint splotches are so small that it's sticking to me everywhere. So here's where I finally got smart and said, oh, I'm going to use my gel press plate to hold these little pieces in place while I paint them. So I took the little paint splotches and just stuck them right to the gel press plate. Now I can just pick up the color and add the color and paint those little paint splotches, and I'm not worrying about getting my fingers all painty, not that I really care, but now I'm not going to touch the paint that's drying, and my little paint splotches aren't moving all around. I'm not chasing them on the table because my gel press plate is holding them in place. So I'm just going to get those coated. Now, the thing that I love is using the Heavy Body paint. I can really just build that paint up so that it looks like wet paint splotches when it's dry. So I really just kept that really thick and really left it there. So once everything was dry, I came back and you can see that I pulled out the paintbrush too and I painted it and took the color and smeared it about so it can dry. Now I took a little bit of the Crafter's Workshop Gold and just used my finger and added a little sheen to that, just again to give it more definition. So now I'm going to take the paintbrush and make sure that it's all ready to go. And I want to put all my little paint splotches in order of where I would like them to be on my palette. And so I'm just going to kind of play with them here for a few minutes, line them up, make sure that everything is where I want it before I start using the adhesive to glue them in place. So we're just going to line this up. Make sure that your red when you're doing your palette is always out of the way from your white. So I'm going to use Beacon Power Tack to just glue these little pieces down. Doesn't take much, and this stuff is amazing. It is so strong. So just a little dab will do ya, and we're going to glue them all down. So there you go. I sped that up for you. They're all ready to go. So now I'm going to just add a little bit more to the back of this paint palette itself and adhere that to my card where I want it in place. And a little bit we need for the paintbrush. So I'm just using a plastic chopstick here just to add it. I want just a tiny bit on that paintbrush. And so I'm just putting that on there. And now I'm just going to figure out where I want it. And there we go. So we're going to press it in place. And there's my card. So wasn't that easy? I hope you enjoyed this. Here's a close-up view of that little card that we just made, and a few others of the other prints that we did last Wednesday.
All right, so that's all there is to it. I encourage you to pull out those gel press plates and play. And if you haven't seen the new Impressables yet, make sure you get your hands on one right away. We've got 4 different styles, so check them out. You can see them on our website. We'll have more posts and videos coming up soon. If your stores don't have them, give them a call. Tell them to get that order in right away. And hopefully you'll do something creative and live your art life too. Thanks. Bye.